is ATL Day Ones, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta. And it starts now.
Welcome in ATL Day Ones with Jarvis and Tenitra. Want to just say thank you for rocking with ATL Day Ones as your first listen of the day. And remember, we're free and available wherever you download your podcast and wherever you download your podcast. Make sure that you leave us a 5-star review. We really appreciate that in advance, because the reason why we ask that is because everybody else can find out how great we are. That's just how we get down on this show, because we talk about a lot of good stuff, and today is no different. I think we found the one advantage that the Falcons may have over the Saints. We'll talk about that. And coming up in the next segment, we will speak with Tiffany Green, ESPN play-by-play broadcaster, color analyst, sideline reporter. She's just a woman of all type of tools. She's the 5'2" broadcaster. She's gonna join us today. And last but not least, in the For the Culture, Serena's just awesome. We'll talk about all that. But first, T, we got to talk about, Marcus Mariota. Obviously the Falcons brought him in to be the starting quarterback, QB1, in spite of, drafting the guy in the third round. Potentially could be the face of the future. In Desmond Ridder. So, but I think one thing that both you and I thought was very interesting was that Arthur Smith joined the Rich Eisen podcast, and he spoke to how the offense is going to look a little different this year, versus what it was back in 2019 when he was the offensive coordinator for the Titans and Marcus Mariota was the starting quarterback for the Tennessee Titans. And I think that it kind of all came to fruition when, the Falcons playing the Saints next week, right? And the Falcons' nemesis, Caleb McGarry's nightmare, Cam Jordan, kind of spoke to what Marcus Mariota brings to the table.
Pocket passer like, Matt was. This is going to change up their game a lot. I mean, then you got Cordero Patterson, who took off last year, so I'm sure they'll incorporate him. We've got zero film to work off of to prepare for what could be a lethal offense if you throw in Kyle Pitts, who's, in my mind, is going to be one of the top talked about wide receivers in the game.
TD. Now, Cam Jordan is about as straight a shooter as we've come to see in Falcons opponents and within the division. Did he just say lethal offense?
Indeed. That was very interesting because, yes, he is the guy who will not just read or has not just read the Falcons for filth over the years, but he has always spoken about reading them for filth over the years, particularly reading that McGarry guy, for filth. So for him to actually say that there must be something that he can see, and don't get me wrong, I still think there is going to be a challenge in the trenches. I really, really still do believe that. However, I think what Cam is referring to really is the secret weapon of a retooled wide receiver room, a retooled tight end room, and the guy under center that's going to get them the ball. Because again, one of the reasons that Cam was able to have a field day wasn't just because of poor protection from Matt Ryan, but because Matt Ryan couldn't get away from Cam once that protection broke down. It's real different now. We have seen it throughout the offseason. We saw it throughout the preseason. You're talking about both quarterbacks. So whether that's Marcus Mariota, whom we assume will be under center, or that is Desmond Ridder, there will be a quarterback who, if they can see Cam coming out of their third eye, they can actually get away and maybe make a play. And then you have a Kyle Pitts, who is arguably, just the big, strong, tight end type and a wide receiver type like a Drake London as well, who can actually make some of that secondary miss. Because I don't know if that stays secondary. It's vaunted, but I don't know if it's as vaunted as it used to be. So my thought is that those are at least part of the reasons that Cam Jordan is thinking that, coupled to the fact of an earlier point that you made. Arthur Smith talked about the fact that when he had Mariota in Tennessee, he was the OC. And maybe that offense wasn't able to open up as much because A, Marcus Mariota was not the outright QB1. And B, you're trying to navigate a Ryan Tannehill who is not like one of these things is doing his own thing when he compared to Ridder and Mariota.
Indeed.
Mariota, I believe, will give Smith also a different weapon to work with. And that is going to be something that Cam Jordan, Dennis Allen, and company have to figure out before week 1.
It's definitely it's one thing to add a nuance to a certain thing
Mm,
because, like you said, Cam Jordan's gotten used to playing against Matt Ryan, who was basically a statue, in the
yeah.
pocket. Like
Oh, yeah.
once you get there, you're there. You don't have to think about anything else. So I think that when you have a guy like a play caller like Arthur Smith, with that added nuance, and I think that it's going to be an advantage Falcons because I think that. Arthur Smith is an excellent play caller. I think he's going to put Marcus Mariota in great situations for him to be able to make easy decisions. You know
Mm-hmm.
who else is going to make help you make the easy decisions? The doggone BetOnline.net. Tell the folks about what they have going on for all the lucky Locked On Sports Atlanta listeners.
Indeed, it is an easy decision. If you are trying to figure something out that we all found out last night, that the queen is not done. So at the beginning of the US Open, Serena Williams was a 50-1 bet to win it all. Then she moved down to 30-1 after round 1. And now after winning in 3 sets in round 2, she is a 14-1 bet to win the US Open. But if you want to watch that trend of where she is, then BetOnline is the place for you to go because that is where you can get all your sports info and all the new developments across any sport. So again, betonline.net is where you can go for your major sports like the NFL, NBA, if you will, MLB, because listen, we got ourselves a 17-win pitcher in Kyle Wright. So if you want to see how his numbers are trending up for the Cy Young in the National League, that's your spot to go as well. And we talk about it all the time for niche sports like tennis, like golf, like MMA. It is betonline.net indeed. So stop there right after you watch ATL Day Ones. You can check them out on your laptop, on your mobile, or any connected device that you have, because that betonline.net is where the game begins.
Yes, and the Falcons have continued to make a couple of roster moves here and there. They have cut Mike Ford and Dean Marlowe because hey, they had to make a couple of claims on some guys up front. One of them we talked about, Mr. Chume from the New York Jets, and they also picked up a defensive lineman from the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yes.
And I think that what we talked about, our concerns as far as solidifying it up front. I think that's what the Falcons did when they made these moves.
Yeah, and this is one of those that harkens back to the draft, right? When
Right.
everybody thought to themselves, first round, Drake London, it's like, oh, dear God, not again. But then you start seeing them making moves, right? You start
Right.
seeing an Arnold Ebiketie, and you see a Troy Anderson, and you start getting excited. You see a Tyler Algier, because that then told you, hey, once we got the best guy, if you will, at the position we had in the draft, now we're going to go after our needs.
Right.
This to me, getting the guy from the Chiefs, getting Dickerson from the Chiefs, getting Adoga from the Jets, that speaks to that. And going back to something you said yesterday as well, when you see somebody and have the opportunity of joint practices and even a preseason game, and you see something that could work in your system, maybe Adoga did not quite work in the Jet system, but could very well do some things, some good things. And always we see and we know whether it is defensive tackle or offensive tackle translation in the trenches, it seems like you always need that depth as the season wears on. So I do like that they went on the waiver wire and said, hey, those are some guys that we think can pick up and somehow can make contributions.
Yes, that's all. At this point, that's all you're looking for because you want to see. Maybe you can put a claim in, put these guys on your 53 to see if they're going to be a fit for your squad. And I think that Dickerson is that guy because he's more of a 3-4 type defensive end from a body style standpoint. And then Adoga is a guy who was a 3rd-round pick and he's a guy that who has some talent there. So they want to see if he can figure out a way to keep him because, hey, they did not pick up the 5th option on Caleb McGarry, so he won't be here next year. So, yeah, let that sink in for a second. All right, now, the Braves, they get a win last night. Kyle Wright, like you mentioned, 17-game winner. He's leading the entire major leagues in wins, and I think that he's starting to climb up the ranks as far as from a Cy Young in the National League, and he's in front of Justin Verlander, who everybody knows exactly who he is, and I think that Kyle Wright is starting to make a name for himself around around the league water cooler talk as well. They get the win 3-2 last night. He goes 7 innings. Then you have AJ Minter come in, and then you have Kenley Jansen come in and do what Kenley Jansen's been doing as of late. T, like, what is going on here? I get it, but golly, man, do you have to scare us every time?
Usually you and I will go down the road of good, bad, and ugly, right?
Right.
So today we have a surprise for you guys. We don't even have a bad. In my opinion, we have 2 goods and an ugly. Let's just be real. That's the way I see it.
Basically.
So the good is Kyle Wright and Ronald Acuna Jr. Kyle Wright, 2 back-to-back 7 scoreless innings. You want to know how serious that is? The Braves have not seen that in 12 years. 12 years. So that tells you how powerful it is for him to be able to go that deep in a game, which is something that Brian Sticker always is looking for, and then to be able to pull it off scoreless. And then you're talking about just a handful of hits within those scoreless innings, right? So yeah, just incredible to see what Kyle Wright has been able to do. And like we always talk about, all he needed was a little bit of run support. Austin Riley gave it to him to start off, and Ronald Acuna Jr. gave him the insurance that ended up essentially being the game winner. So good to see Ronald Acuna Jr. back. I think the strategy is working. We cringed at it for having him out 3 games, but if this is what it's going to take for us to see him be who he needs to be in the postseason or deep down the stretch for the Braves, then I'm all for it. And yeah,
No
Kelly, we're just going to put you on the altar of prayer.
Yes.
Needs better out of you.
Because Lord knows Will Smith was on that same altar last year and ended up working out for us. So, hey, God does answer prayers. I don't care about nobody say he don't pay attention to sports. Yes, he does. He's all knowing and all seeing. So, yeah.
Braves country is God's country, right? Mm-hmm.
That's what it is. But coming up next, though, we're going to have a very special guest, HBCU extraordinaire, Tiffany Green, ESPN sideline reporter / analyst / play-by-play person. She is the 5'2" broadcaster. She will be joining us next right here on ATL Day Ones. Don't go anywhere.